An ancient forest holds more than just trees. Have you ever walked beneath its canopy and felt a watchful presence, a silent whisper from the wood itself? That subtle feeling is an echo from a world where every tree had a soul, a guardian spirit known as a dryad. We are about to journey into the captivating realm of these enigmatic tree nymphs from Greek mythology, a world that perfectly blends our modern love for fantasy with a deep, timeless connection to nature. By the end of this, you will understand the secret language of the forests and the powerful forces the Greeks believed resided within. We will uncover why harming a single tree could bring a terrible curse and explore the tragic bond between a spirit and her living home. What forgotten truth about our relationship with nature do these ancient tree spirits hold for us today? A dryad is the living soul of a tree, a female spirit bound to her wooden body in a sacred, unbreakable pact. Unlike other nymphs who dance in mountain springs or rule over ocean waves, the dryad's entire existence is rooted to a single, specific tree. Her life force and the trees are one and the same. The very name dryad whispers this ancient truth, born from the Greek word for oak tree, drus. While many think of them as general forest spirits, their identity is far more intimate and profound. They are not merely inhabitants of the woods, they are the woods, each one a unique guardian spirit embodying the essence of her individual oak, apple, or poplar. This singular connection makes them different from a naiad, whose spirit flows with the water of her stream, or an oread, whose presence is as enduring as her mountain peak. A dryad does not simply live in her tree, she is her tree. A breath of wind through the leaves is her sigh, the rough texture of the bark is her skin, and the deep, hidden roots are her anchor to the world. This is why the fate of a dryad is so deeply poignant, her destiny irrevocably tied to the health and survival of her living home. This bond between a dryad and her tree is one of absolute, heartbreaking symbiosis. Think of it not as a spirit choosing a home, but as a single life expressed in two forms, one of wood and leaf, the other of ethereal spirit. The tree's roots are her anchor to the earth, its sap is her lifeblood, and the gentle rustle of its leaves is her very voice. When the tree is healthy, basking in the sun and drawing deep from the soil, the dryad flourishes. She might be seen dancing in the dappled light around its trunk, her form vibrant and full of energy, a visible extension of the tree's own vitality. Her lifespan is the tree's lifespan, a long, slow, peaceful existence measured in centuries of growth, but this beautiful connection carries a profound and tragic weight. If her tree is wounded, the dryad feels a physical, spiritual agony. A deep gash in the bark is a scar upon her own essence. A parasitic vine choking the trunk would feel to her like a slow, suffocating pressure. And if the tree is felled, if its life is cut short, the bond is severed with a finality that echoes through the spirit world. The dryad does not simply move on to another tree. Her existence is so deeply woven into that one specific living being that its death becomes her own. Ancient tales speak of the mournful, fading cry of a dryad as her tree crashes to the forest floor, a sound of pure sorrow that silences the birds and makes the very air grow heavy. This is why the Greeks held such a deep-seated reverence for their groves. To harm a tree was not merely an act of deforestation, it was an act of spiritual murder. You were not just cutting down wood, you were ending a conscious, feeling life that had watched the world turn for generations. This understanding transforms a simple forest from a collection of resources into a sacred community, every single member precious and irreplaceable. The fate of the spirit is sealed with the final blow of the axe. Yet within this world of spirit and wood, there existed an even deeper, more sacred bond. We find it in the Hamadryads, the most profound and tragic of all tree nymphs. Where other dryads might find a tree to call home, a Hamadryad does not choose her tree. She is born with it, her spirit emerging into the world at the very moment her tree first breaks through the soil as a sapling. Their lives are not merely linked, they are a single life from the very beginning, an unbreakable pact of shared existence. This ultimate connection means a Hamadryad can never wander far from her tree, not even for a moment. Her entire world is the small patch of earth shaded by its branches. To be separated from it is a physical and spiritual torment she cannot endure. The ancient story of the nymph Dryope offers a heartbreaking glimpse into this fate. Dryope was a mortal woman who unknowingly plucked a blossom from a tree that was, in fact, a Hamadryad in disguise. As the sap flowed from the broken branch like blood, the spirit within was wounded, and a terrible curse was unleashed. Dryope herself began to transform, her feet rooting into the ground, her skin hardening into bark. She was becoming a tree, merging with the very being she had harmed, a permanent and chilling reminder of the sacred life she had violated. This myth underscores the immense stakes of the Hamadryads' existence. Their groves were not just pretty places, they were sanctuaries of absolute life and death. To carelessly break a branch, to strip away the bark, was not simple vandalism. It was an assault on a living, feeling consciousness, and to cut down such a tree was an act of profound violence, a murder that silenced two lives with a single blow. This is why the ancients approached certain groves with such fear and reverence, for they knew they were walking not among mere plants, but among entire worlds of spirit, each one incredibly fragile and eternally bound to its solitary wooden heart. That profound connection with a single tree was just the beginning, for the Greeks saw a distinct spirit in every kind of forest giant. While we use the name Dryad for all tree nymphs, the ancient world was far more specific, naming these spirits for the very trees they embodied. The Meliae, for instance, were the nymphs of the ash tree. Their origin story is as primal as it gets, born from the drops of blood that fell upon the earth when the sky god Uranus was wounded. This means the first ash tree nymphs sprang directly from the raw, creative power of the world itself, linking them to a time of gods and titans. They were not just guardians of the wood, but figures of immense cosmic significance, their trees providing the wood for the spears of legendary heroes. Then there are the Daphne, the spirits of the sacred laurel tree. Their very name echoes one of the most famous myths of unrequited love. The nymph Daphne, fleeing the advances of the god Apollo, called out to her father, a river god, for help. To save her, he transformed her into the first laurel tree. From that moment, the laurel became sacred to Apollo, and its nymphs, the Daphne, carried that legacy of divine protection and poetic inspiration. To wear a crown of laurel was to touch a piece of that story, a symbol of victory that was literally woven from a transformed spirit. And we cannot forget the Epimeliads, the nymphs of apple trees. These guardians were often depicted as protectors of sheep as well, their name hinting at this dual role. An apple orchard represented more than just fruit. It was a place of nourishment, abundance, and sometimes hidden danger, as a single golden apple could spark a conflict that would lead to the Trojan War. The Epimeliads watched over these precious groves, their presence ensuring the fertility of the land and the flocks that grazed nearby. Each type of tree spirit, from the cosmic Meliae to the inspiring Daphne and the bountiful Epimeliad, reveals a deeper layer of the Greek worldview. They did not simply see a forest, they saw a complex society of spirits, each with its own history, its own purpose, and its own sacred relationship with humanity. So the next time you see an ancient oak, a graceful laurel, or a fruitful apple tree, remember that to an ancient Greek, you were not just looking at a plant. You were in the presence of a specific, named consciousness, a living story rooted deeply in the earth. So where do these gentle guardians of the wood fit in a world ruled by powerful, often tempestuous gods? The Dryads were not solitary figures, but vital threads in the divine tapestry, answering to deities who shaped the wild places they called home. Chief among their protectors was Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt and the untamed wilderness. While she was a master archer who could bring down any beast, Artemis was also the fierce protector of the young and the wild. She roamed the forests with her band of nymphs, and the Dryads were under her direct, watchful care. To offend a tree spirit was to risk the wrath of this formidable goddess, whose arrows never missed their mark. She represented the sacred balance of the hunt, a reminder that taking from nature required respect and was never without consequence. Then there was Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and fertile growth. His vibrant, chaotic energy was the very pulse of the forest's vitality. where Dionysus and his revelous followers traveled, the woods would burst into life, vines grew heavy with grapes, and the Dryads were said to join his wild, celebratory dances. He embodied the untamed, creative life force that flowed through the trees and the spirits within them, a force both joyful and dangerously powerful. Even the king of the gods, Zeus, held the Dryads in esteem. Certain groves of ancient oaks were considered his sacred places, their rustling leaves a form of divine prophecy. To cut down one of these trees was not just an insult to its nymph, but a direct affront to Zeus himself. This celestial patronage reveals the true weight of the Dryads' role. They were not minor spirits, but essential agents of a cosmic order. Their well-being directly reflected the health of the natural world, a world the gods themselves had sworn to protect. When a Dryad suffered, it was a sign that this sacred balance was under threat, and the divine powers that maintain the world would take notice. The sanctity of a grove was not just a poetic idea, it was a fundamental law of the universe, upheld by spirits and gods alike. The origin of these tree spirits is as ancient and wild as the first forests themselves. One of the oldest tales tells of a violent, cosmic birth. When the sky god Uranus was cast down, his blood fell upon the receptive earth, and from those sacred drops sprang the fierce Melee, the nymphs of the ash tree. They were not born of gentle nature, but of primal conflict, their very essence woven from the blood of a god and the soil of the world. This connects them directly to the raw power of creation, making them far more than simple woodland sprites. They were the earth's own children, born from its deepest trauma. But other Dryads emerged from moments of divine compassion. A god might breathe life into a particularly ancient and beautiful tree, gifting it with a conscious spirit to serve as its guardian. In some stories, the tears of a heartbroken nymph fallen upon the roots of a sapling could cause a new Dryad to awaken within it, a sister spirit born from shared sorrow. These varied origins paint a profound picture. The Dryads were not a uniform race, but a diverse family of consciousnesses, each born from a different moment of cosmic significance. Some were born from chaos, others from blessing, and some from profound empathy. This means that every rustling leaf in a sacred grove was not just a sound, it was an echo of an ancient story, a living remnant of the world's tumultuous and beautiful beginning. To stand among them was to stand inside a myth still being told. The stories of the Dryads are not just footnotes in mythology, they are powerful narratives that shaped the very fabric of ancient belief. Among these spirits, a few names echo through the ages, their personal tragedies defining the perilous relationship between mortals, gods, and the sacred wild. We have already met Daphne, the nymph whose fate gave the laurel tree its name. Her story is one of desperate flight and divine transformation. Pursued by the radiant god Apollo, who was struck by Eros' arrow of desire, Daphne ran for her life. As Apollo's breath warmed her neck, she cried out to her father, the river god Peneus, begging for salvation. He answered by transforming her, her skin hardening into bark, her arms stretching into branches, her feet rooting deep into the earth. She became the first laurel tree, forever safe from Apollo's grasp. In his grief and reverence, Apollo declared the laurel sacred, weaving its leaves into a crown to honor poets and heroes. Daphne's story is a poignant lesson on the cost of sanctuary, a spirit who found eternal safety only by becoming one with the forest itself. But an even more haunting tale is that of Eurydice, an oak nymph whose life was a brief, beautiful melody. On the day of her wedding to the legendary musician Orpheus, she was bitten by a venomous snake and died, her spirit fleeing to the shadowy underworld. Her death was not merely a personal loss, it was a rupture in the natural order. A tree spirit, a creature of sun and soil, was trapped in the land of the dead. This sent her grieving husband on his famed descent, his lyre in hand, to charm Hades himself with a song of such profound sorrow that the god agreed to release her. The condition, of course, was the famous glance back, a moment of human doubt that condemned Eurydice to vanish forever into the darkness. Her story is a double tragedy, first a physical death in the sunlit world, and then a second, spiritual death at the very threshold of life. It speaks to the fragility of the bond between the living world of nature and the finality of death, a chasm not even the most beautiful music could permanently bridge. These myths of Daphne and Eurydice are more than just captivating dramas, they are ancient warnings and profound truths. They teach us about the consequences of desire, the price of salvation, and the heartbreak that occurs when the sacred balance between the human and natural worlds is broken. Each story is a leaf on the great tree of myth, reminding us that every spirit, every tree, has a narrative worth remembering. Their personalities were as complex and varied as the forests they inhabited. Picture a dryad not as a simple sprite, but as a being of profound duality, capable of both enchanting gentleness and terrifying fury. By nature, they were shy and reclusive, spirits who preferred the quiet company of their own trees and the gentle animals of the wood. To a respectful traveler, a lost child, or a hunter who took only what he needed, a dryad might reveal herself as a fleeting, benevolent presence. She could be the sudden, comforting rustle of leaves on a lonely path, the glimpse of a graceful form half hidden behind an ancient trunk, or the source of a soft, guiding melody that led the lost back to safety. These spirits were the soul of hospitality for those who honored the wild, offering protection and subtle guidance without ever asking for thanks. Their benevolence was a quiet gift, a reflection of the forest's own nurturing spirit. But this gentle nature had a sharp and unforgiving edge. The same spirit who would guide a child home could unleash a curse of unimaginable suffering upon anyone who threatened her tree. This wrath was not mere anger, it was a fundamental law of their existence, a necessary defense for a life utterly vulnerable to the axes of mortals. The myth of Eurydice, an arrogant king, serves as the ultimate warning. Consumed by hubris, he marched into a sacred grove of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, and commanded his servants to fell a massive, ancient oak. They hesitated, terrified, for they could hear the mournful pleas of the Hamadryad within. Enraged, Eurydice took the axe himself and struck the trunk. As he did, blood flowed from the wound, and the voice of the nymph cried out a curse upon him before fading into silence. The goddess Demeter, hearing the spirit's dying plea, punished the king with a hunger that could never be satisfied. He sold all his possessions, even his own daughter, to buy food, and ultimately devoured his own body in a frenzy of insatiable hunger. This story illustrates the absolute consequence of harming a sacred tree. The Dryad's curse, amplified by a greater deity, was not just a punishment, it was a poetic justice that mirrored the violation. He who destroyed a source of life was condemned to a consumption that could never sustain life. This dual nature, the capacity for both nurturing grace and righteous vengeance, defines the true essence of the Dryad. They were not passive decorations of the woodland, but active, powerful guardians. Their kindness was a reward for respect, and their wrath was the inevitable price for disrespecting the sacred balance of nature. To know a dryad was to understand that the forest itself was alive, watching, and would answer every action with either a blessing or a curse. That duality of grace and fury was not just a character trait, it was a fundamental law of the wild. The Dryad's curse was a swift and terrifying reality for any mortal foolish enough to ignore the sacred boundaries of the grove. Beyond the legendary downfall of King Eurydice, lesser-known tales echo with the same grim warning, each punishment tailored perfectly to the crime. A woodsman who felled a healthy tree to build a larger home might find his own family struck with a sudden, unexplainable madness, their minds becoming as fractured as the stump he left behind. The spirit's vengeance turned his prize lumber into a cage of delusion, a constant reminder that his greed had shattered a peaceful consciousness. In another story, a farmer who cleared a small stand of trees to plant more crops would watch in horror as his existing fields withered overnight. The dryads of the fallen trees had blighted his land, ensuring his hunger would mirror the emptiness he had created. Their justice was poetic, an eye for an eye that resonated through the very soil. Even a minor act of disrespect could invoke a subtle yet chilling retribution. A traveler who relieved himself against an ancient trunk or carved his initials into the bark might find the forest itself turning against him. The path he knew so well would become a tangled maze, familiar landmarks would seem to shift, and a soft, mocking laughter would echo just beyond his sight. He was not hunted, but he was hopelessly lost, forced to wander until he offered a sincere apology or made a sacrificial offering to the spirit he had offended. These stories were not merely frightening campfire tales, they were the moral compass of an ancient culture. The Greeks embedded a powerful lesson in every myth of Dryadic vengeance, a lesson about the consequences of human arrogance. They understood that nature was not a passive resource to be consumed, but a conscious, reactive force. To harm it was to invite a retaliation that was both personal and inescapable. The Dryad's curse was the voice of the forest itself, teaching that every action, no matter how small, carries a reaction. The respect they demanded was not for their own sake, but for the preservation of a balance that sustained all life, mortal and divine alike. These sacred groves were the cathedrals of the ancient world, places where the boundary between the earthly and the divine grew thin. To step into a grove dedicated to the Dryads was to enter a space of profound silence and palpable power, where every leaf seemed to watch and every root seemed to hold a secret. These were not simply clusters of trees, they were consecrated ground, set apart from the ordinary world by a deep and universal reverence. No axe was ever lifted here, no branch was broken for kindling. The air itself felt different, charged with a quiet energy that hushed the voice and slowed the step. Mortals entered these spaces only with a purpose: to worship, to seek an oracle, or to offer a sacrifice. To do otherwise was to invite the kind of fate that befell the arrogant Eurydice. The sanctity of the grove was a social and spiritual law understood by every Greek, from the lowliest farmer to the most powerful king. Within these hallowed spaces, the trees themselves were the pillars and the altar. Towering oaks, sacred to Zeus, were believed to whisper prophecies through the rustling of their leaves, interpreted by priests who understood their ancient language. Groves of poplars, with their leaves that seemed to chatter in the wind, were often dedicated to Hera or other goddesses, and the willows, dipping their branches into quiet streams, held the melancholy spirits of trees that mirrored their graceful, weeping forms. The very ecosystem of the grove was a testament to its sacred status. Without the threat of human interference, the forest grew as it was meant to, with fallen trees left to return to the earth, creating a rich, spongy floor that nurtured new life. Sunlight filtered through a dense, untouched canopy in dappled patterns that shifted with the hour, illuminating clearings that felt like natural sanctuaries. This was the Dryad's true home, a perfect, self-sustaining world where a tree could live out its full, magnificent lifespan in peace. The cultural power of these groves extended far beyond their borders, anchoring entire communities to the divine. A sacred grove was often the heart of a local cult, a place where a town's identity and its relationship with the gods were forged. Annual festivals would be held at its edge, with processions, hymns, and offerings of milk, honey, or wine poured onto the roots of the oldest trees. These rituals were not empty gestures, they were vital acts of reciprocity, a way for humanity to give back to the spiritual forces that provided them with clean air, fresh water, and fertile soil. By honoring the Dryads, the people were, in essence, honoring the life-giving power of nature itself. The grove was a constant, living reminder that their survival was intertwined with the well-being of the spirits in the wood. To protect it was to protect themselves, a covenant written not on stone, but in the very landscape they called home. So when we picture a Dryad dancing in the dappled light, we must see her within this context, not in a random forest, but in a temple without walls, a space so holy that the mere act of entering it was a form of prayer. The life of a Dryad begins with a single, silent miracle. As a new sapling pushes its first tender leaves through the soil, a corresponding consciousness stirs within the wood. This is not a spirit that moves in, but one that awakens, a sentient life born in perfect unison with the tree it will forever guard. Her earliest years are a time of profound vulnerability and quiet discovery. The young Dryad is little more than a shimmer of potential, her form barely distinguishable from the dappled light playing on her sapling's delicate bark. She learns the language of the forest through the gentle touch of rain and the warm caress of the sun, her own existence a fragile echo of her tree's slow, determined growth. As decades turn into centuries and the sapling stretches into a mighty oak or a graceful poplar, the Dryad enters her vibrant maturity. Her connection to the living world deepens, and her spirit gains strength and definition. This is her golden age, a long, slow dance of centuries where she is fully present, a visible guardian of her domain. She might be seen as a more solid form, laughing with the birds nesting in her branches or tracing the patterns of lichen on her trunk. Her life is measured by the seasons, a cyclical rhythm of blossoming, fruiting, and dormancy that never grows tedious. She witnesses generations of animals raise their young in her shade and feels the subtle shifts in the forest around her. This is the era of her greatest power and presence, a testament to the enduring vitality of the ancient woods. But all lives, even those measured in millennia, are subject to time's relentless march. The first signs of a Dryad's decline are subtle, a gradual dimming of her ethereal light that mirrors the aging of her tree. As the trunk becomes gnarled and hollow and the branches grow sparse, her form becomes more difficult to perceive. She spends less time dancing in the sun and more time resting within the heartwood, her energy conserved, her voice little more than a faint rustle in the wind. The vibrant spirit of her youth slowly recedes, becoming one with the quiet, ancient wisdom of the old tree. The end of a Dryad's life is as peaceful and as tragic as its beginning. When her tree finally falls, whether by a storm's violence or the simple, slow surrender of old age, the bond is gently severed. There is no violent cry, only a soft, fading sigh as her spirit dissipates back into the essence of the forest from which it came. Her consciousness doesn't travel to an underworld or a heavenly plane, it simply returns, its long vigil complete. Yet in this poignant end lies the promise of a new beginning. The fallen tree becomes a nurse log, its decaying body providing rich nourishment for the next generation of saplings. And from one of those new green shoots, another silent miracle occurs, and a new Dryad awakens to begin the cycle once more. Her story is a beautiful, heartbreaking lesson in mortality, showing us that even an ancient spirit is part of a greater, endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This delicate balance between spirit and mortal was governed by unspoken laws as ancient as the trees themselves. For a human to approach a Dryad's domain was to walk a razor's edge, where a single misstep could bring either a blessing or a curse. The most absolute taboo was, of course, the felling of a healthy, inhabited tree, but the rules went far deeper than that. A traveler could not break a living branch for a walking stick, nor strip bark for kindling. To relieve oneself against a sacred trunk was a profound insult, and to carve one's name into the bark was to scar the spirit's own skin. These were not minor social faux pas, they were spiritual transgressions that invited immediate and often poetic retribution. The forest had eyes, and the Dryads were its memory, remembering every offense and every act of respect for centuries. Yet within this framework of strict prohibitions, rare and beautiful alliances could blossom. A mortal family that lived on the edge of a wood might be entrusted with the care of a particular grove. In return for their vigilance, keeping away blight and warning off careless woodsmen, the Dryads would ensure their wells never ran dry and their small orchard bore the sweetest fruit. This was a pact of mutual protection, a silent agreement between the human and the natural world. There are whispers in the old tales of heroes who earned such a spirit's favor. A young man lost in a winter storm on the verge of freezing might stumble upon an ancient, hollow oak. Taking shelter within its trunk without causing harm, he would awaken to find himself warm and safe, a single, perfect leaf placed upon his chest as a token of the Dryad's grace. In another story, a kind-hearted woodcutter, known for only taking deadfall and never harming a living tree, found his axe always stayed sharp and his path home was always clear, guided by a soft, rustling melody only he could hear. These positive interactions highlight a crucial truth often forgotten. The Dryads were not inherently hostile to humanity. Their wrath was reserved for the arrogant and the destructive. For those who approached with humility and a genuine reverence for the life of the forest, these shy spirits could become the most powerful and loyal of allies, their blessings as potent as their curses. They served as a constant reminder that our relationship with nature is not one of dominance, but of reciprocity. The grove gives, but it also expects to receive respect in return. It is a living contract, and the Dryads were its eternal witnesses and enforcers. The silent presence of the Dryad was never meant to stay hidden in the woods. It was captured for all time by the hands of ancient artists, who translated the whispers of the forest into stunning visual form. On the curved surfaces of Greek vases and in the cool marble of temple sculptures, these tree spirits came to life. They were almost always shown as women of breathtaking beauty, their forms both human and otherworldly. You would see a graceful figure, her lower body subtly fading into the bark of a tree trunk, or one arm gracefully extended as if it were a slender branch. In other depictions, she might be standing freely, yet holding a slender shoot of oak or a cluster of leaves, a clear symbol of her inseparable connection to the living wood. This artistic choice was profound. It visually represented the core of her existence, a spirit forever caught between two worlds, neither fully human nor entirely plant, but a perfect, ethereal blend of both. This was not just decoration, it was a theological statement in clay and stone, a way for an entire culture to visualize the soul of the forest. The artists made them beautiful for a reason. Their allure reflected the irresistible, life-giving beauty of nature itself, something to be revered and approached with awe, never with a careless axe. This classical vision of the nature spirit, born on Athenian pottery, would not be forgotten. It slept for centuries, waiting for its rebirth. When the Renaissance swept through Europe, a renewed fascination with the classical world brought the Dryad out of the dark woods and into the bright light of a new age. Masters like Botticelli and the artists working in the Medici courts rediscovered these mythological beings. They painted them with the same idealized beauty, often placing them in lush, dreamlike landscapes that echoed the sacred groves of old. The Dryad became a symbol of the rediscovered harmony between humanity and the natural world, a perfect subject for an era obsessed with blending classical ideals with humanist philosophy. But the true reflowering of the tree spirit came centuries later with the arrival of Art Nouveau at the turn of the 20th century. This movement, which sought to break free from the rigid industrial age, found its muse in the flowing, organic forms of nature. And the Dryad was its perfect emblem. Artists like Alphonse Mucha did not just paint women with trees, they created images where the female form and the natural world were completely fused. Flowing hair would curl into twisting vines, graceful bodies would be framed by arches of willow branches, and the very lines of a poster would mimic the growth patterns of a plant. The Dryad was no longer a figure in a landscape, she was the landscape. Her image was used to sell everything from champagne to cigarettes, not as a cheapening of the myth, but as a desperate, beautiful attempt to bring a sense of organic wonder back into everyday urban life. She became the ultimate symbol of an artistic rebellion, a reminder that even in a world of steel and smoke, the wild, living spirit of nature persisted. From a black figure on a Greek amphora to an iconic poster on a Parisian street, the journey of the Dryad in art shows us something incredible. It proves that the human need to give nature a face, to see a conscious, beautiful spirit in the ancient oak, is a thread that connects us directly to the worldview of our earliest ancestors. That silent face in the bark continues to watch us, a timeless guardian whose image is as enduring as the forests she represents. The whispered stories of the Dryads did not fade with the fall of an axe, they were carefully preserved in the ink of poets. In the hands of masters like Ovid and Hesiod, these tree spirits became powerful symbols, their lives etched into verse to explore humanity's most profound struggles. Hesiod, one of the earliest Greek poets, gave the Dryads a lineage as ancient as the hills. In his Theogony, he sings of the Meliae, the ash tree nymphs, born from a time of cosmic violence. He writes that they sprang to life when the blood of the wounded sky god, Uranus, fell upon the life-giving earth. This was no gentle origin, it rooted these spirits in the very foundation of the world's order, making them living remnants of a divine rebellion. They represented the untamable, primal force of nature itself, a power that existed long before the comforts of human civilization. Their wildness was not mere chaos, but a fundamental, creative energy. Then, centuries later, the Roman poet Ovid would immortalize their personal tragedies in his Metamorphoses. He gave us the haunting voice of the Dryad, making her suffering palpable. In the tale of Eurydice, as the axe bites into her sacred oak, the nymph within cries out. Ovid gives her these heartbreaking words, a plea that echoes through the ages. I, a nymph most dear to Ceres, dwell within this tree, and I who now am dying, prophesy to you that punishment for this wicked deed is close at hand. This is more than a curse, it is a declaration of her sacred identity and a testimony to the interconnectedness of all life. Her dying breath is a prophecy linking her fate directly to the wrath of a greater goddess. Ovid uses the Dryad to explore the tragic intersection of the mortal and divine realms, where human hubris shatters a delicate, spiritual balance. Through these poetic lenses, the Dryad becomes a multifaceted symbol of feminine power. She is not a passive maiden, but an active, potent force. In her gentle aspect, she is the nurturing soul of the wild, a motherly protector of the forest, and all who respect it. Yet, when violated, her power transforms into a righteous, destructive fury. She is the untamable wild that cannot be conquered, only respected or destroyed at a terrible cost. The poets used her to ask their audience a difficult question: what happens when humanity's relentless progress collides with the ancient, sacred laws of the world? The answer was always written in the blood of a tree and the fading sigh of its spirit. To read these ancient verses is to hear the very rustle of the leaves in a sacred grove, a timeless warning, and a beautiful, sorrowful song. The rustling leaves of a sacred grove were not just the sound of the wind, they were a language waiting for a reply. For the ancient Greeks, this communication with the Dryads was a formal, reverent practice, a cornerstone of daily life that acknowledged the spirits in every ancient oak and fruitful apple tree. Their worship was deeply animistic, meaning they saw a soul, a conscious presence, not just in trees, but in springs, mountains, and stones. The entire natural world was alive, breathing, and watching. Within this worldview, the Dryads were immediate, accessible divine forces, and honoring them was as essential as tending to one's own family. A farmer would never clear a new field without first making an offering at the edge of the woods, seeking permission from the local spirits. He might pour a libation of fresh water or milk onto the roots of the oldest tree, a simple gift to acknowledge that he was borrowing from their domain. This was not superstition, it was a transaction of respect, a way of saying, I see you, and I honor your presence here. These small, personal rituals were the fabric of the relationship between the human and the natural world, repeated for generations until the reverence was woven into the land itself. Larger communal festivals brought entire villages to the grove's edge. These were joyous, solemn occasions, often tied to the cycles of planting and harvest. A procession would wind its way from the town, led by priests and priestesses carrying baskets of offerings. They would not enter the grove's deepest heart, for that space was too sacred for crowds, but would gather in a cleared area at its border. There they would sing hymns specifically composed for the tree nymphs, their voices rising in harmony with the chirping of crickets and the whisper of leaves. The offerings were simple and pure, things that reflected the bounty of the earth itself. Jars of honey, symbolizing the sweetness of life, would be poured onto the soil. Baskets of ripe fruit, the first and finest of the harvest, would be laid gently between the roots. Sometimes a young lamb or kid would be sacrificed, its blood returned to the earth to nourish the very spirits who ensured the fertility of the flocks. The prayers spoken were direct and heartfelt. A community might ask the Dryads to protect their orchards from blight, to bless their vineyards with abundant grapes, or to watch over the children who played in the nearby fields. They were asking for a partnership, acknowledging that their own survival was inextricably linked to the goodwill of the spirits in the wood. The most profound rituals, however, were often silent and solitary. A person seeking guidance or healing might venture alone into the sacred space, moving slowly and with deliberate respect. they would find a particular tree that felt especially powerful, perhaps one with a strangely twisted trunk or one that seemed to gather the sunlight in a halo. Sitting quietly at its base, they would simply listen. They believed the Dryad could impart wisdom through the pattern of the shifting shadows or offer comfort through the gentle, steady presence of the ancient wood. A mother worried for a sick child might tie a small strip of her own clothing to a low branch, a physical token of her plea for the spirit's intercession. A young man seeking direction for his life might sleep at the foot of a mighty oak, hoping for a prophetic dream sent by the nymph within. These personal encounters required no grand temple or complex ceremony, only a humble heart and a willingness to believe that the tree standing before them was not an object, but a subject, a being with whom one could have a relationship. This was the ultimate expression of the animistic worldview, a lived experience of a world entirely ensouled, where every walk in the woods was a potential conversation and every grove was a church without walls. Yet this vibrant world of tree spirits was not their exclusive domain. To truly grasp the Dryad's unique place in the ancient imagination, we must see her alongside her mythological neighbors, beings like the wild satyrs and the noble centaurs. While they all shared the forest, their natures and purposes were worlds apart. A Dryad was the soul of a single, stationary tree, her existence defined by rootedness and quiet guardianship. In stark contrast, a satyr was pure, unbridled motion. These followers of Dionysus were spirits of the untamed earth, but their energy was chaotic and roving. With the legs and tails of goats and a constant thirst for wine and revelry, they represented the fertile, often disruptive, life force of the wild. They were the noise to the Dryad's silence, the chaotic dance to her serene watchfulness. Their interactions were famously tense. Satyrs, driven by their unruly passions, were often depicted chasing the shy tree nymphs through the woods, a mythological motif that highlights the constant tension between the protective, feminine spirit of place and the invasive, masculine force of untamed desire. The Dryad's defense was her deep connection to her home, often vanishing into the very bark of her tree to escape their clutches, a clear symbol of nature's ability to shield its own sacred heart from violation. Then there were the centaurs, creatures of a completely different order. With the body of a horse and the torso of a man, they embodied a powerful duality, the raw physical strength of the animal world fused with human intelligence, for better or worse. Most centaurs were known for their barbarism and drunkenness, like the ones who disrupted the wedding of Eurydice, sparking a famous battle, yet some, like the wise Chiron, were revered teachers and healers. The centaur's domain was the open mountain meadow and the cave, spaces of movement and herd mentality. Their role was to challenge the boundaries of civilization, often acting as a destructive force that heroes had to overcome. The Dryad in her fixed grove represented a different kind of power, the stable, enduring, and sacred order of the natural world. While a centaur's story was one of action and conflict, the Dryad's was one of presence and preservation. Even the similar Roman fauns, often confused with satyrs, held a distinct role. They were generally seen as more benevolent, rustic spirits of the fields and forests, associated with prophecy and guidance. Where a satyr might chase a Dryad, a faun might simply play his panpipes near her grove, his music a respectful nod to the shared wilderness they inhabited. These distinctions are crucial. They show that the Greeks did not see a monolithic, wild, but a complex ecosystem of spirits, each with a specific function. The Dryad was the anchor, the stable, conscious core of the forest. The satyr was its chaotic, creative energy. The centaur was its untamed, physical power. And the faun was its gentle, musical voice. One was bound to protect a single life, while the others roamed freely, representing the broader, often dangerous, forces of the wild itself. Their famous interactions, whether of conflict or cautious respect, were not just entertaining stories. They were a way for an ancient culture to map the complex and often contradictory relationships within the natural world itself. That profound connection between spirit and tree is far more than a charming story. It is a powerful, ancient symbol that speaks directly to the soul of the natural world. The Dryad embodies the very idea that nature is not a collection of resources, but a living, breathing community of conscious beings. Each spirit represents the soul of a single tree, and collectively, they are the soul of the entire forest. This animistic worldview transforms a walk in the woods from a simple stroll into a conversation with a multitude of silent, watchful lives. It answers that deep, human need to see a face in the bark, to hear a voice in the rustling leaves, and to feel that we are not alone in the wild. The Dryad gives nature a name and a presence we can understand and respect, making the abstract concept of a living planet into a tangible, personal reality. This ancient symbol also holds a beautiful and tragic lesson about the cycle of life and death. A Dryad is born with her tree, flourishes with its maturity, and fades as the tree ages and falls. Her entire existence is a mirror of this universal cycle. She does not fear death in the way mortals do, for her end is a peaceful return to the forest that birthed her. Yet her death is always a profound loss, a unique consciousness extinguished. This duality teaches a powerful truth that life and death are not opposites, but partners in an endless dance of renewal. The fallen tree nourishes the soil for new saplings, and from one of those green shoots, a new Dryad will awaken. Her story is one of individual tragedy within a framework of eternal continuity, reminding us that even in endings, there is always the potential for a new beginning. This symbolism makes the Dryad a poignant emblem of nature's deep vulnerability. Her life is entirely dependent on the health of one single, physical tree. She has no defense against an axe, no recourse against a spreading blight, and no escape from a careless fire. Her existence is a testament to the fragility of the natural world, a world that can be shattered with a single, thoughtless act. The myth of Eurydice is not just a tale of hubris, it is a stark allegory for deforestation and ecological destruction. When the king swings his axe, he is not just killing a tree, he is annihilating a centuries-old consciousness, a guardian of the land. The Dryad's dying curse is the voice of the ecosystem itself, crying out against its own destruction. She represents the ultimate cost of our actions, the silent scream of the forest when its heart is cut out. This leads us directly to the ancient concept of the genius loci, the spirit of a place. A Dryad is the ultimate genius loci. She is not a general forest spirit, but the specific, unique consciousness of a particular oak on a particular hill, or a specific apple tree in a sheltered valley. Her presence sanctifies that exact spot, making it different from every other place in the world. The ancient Greeks understood that location itself had a personality, a memory, and a sacredness. By honoring the Dryad, they were honoring the unique spirit of that grove, that spring, that mountain. This concept invites us to see our own world with new eyes. Perhaps the gnarled old tree at the end of your street, or the quiet patch of woods behind your home, has its own unique presence, its own silent story. The Dryad challenges us to recognize that every place has a spirit, a history, and a right to exist untouched. All of these ancient symbols converge powerfully in our modern ecological consciousness. The Dryad is a pre-scientific, mythological expression of the very principles that environmental science teaches us today. Her inseparable bond with her tree is a perfect metaphor for the interdependence of an ecosystem. Her vulnerability is a warning about the irreversible consequences of habitat loss. Her role as a genius loci reminds us that conservation is not just about saving abstract nature, but about protecting specific, sacred places. When we read about a Dryad's curse falling upon those who harm her tree, we can hear the echo in our own time in the form of climate change, mass extinction, and polluted rivers. The myths told us long ago that to harm nature is to harm ourselves, that the well-being of the spirit is directly tied to the well-being of the land. The Dryad's silent, watchful presence in her grove is an eternal reminder of a covenant we have too often forgotten, a promise to live in reciprocity with the living, breathing world that sustains us all. That ancient whisper from the sacred grove did not fall silent with the last Greek hymn. It simply found new soil in the stories we tell today, from the pages of beloved books to the screens of epic films. C.S. Lewis masterfully transplanted this classical idea into the magical land of Narnia. When the Pevensey children first hear the name is Slan, the very trees of the winter-locked forest stir with a long-forgotten vitality. Later in Prince Caspian, the awakening of the Narnian woods is made manifest through its spirits. The river god rises from the water in a wave of divine fury, and the trees themselves, guided by their dryad-like souls, march to war. Lewis captured the core characteristic of the ancient dryad, the inseparable bond between the spirit and its specific, physical home, but he adapted it for a modern Christian-informed allegory where the entire natural world yearns for its rightful king and joins in the battle between good and evil. This is the dryad reimagined not just as a guardian, but as a soldier for restoration, her rootedness becoming a symbol of steadfast loyalty. Disney's animated film Hercules took a different, more playful approach. The Hydra that Hercules battles is a monstrous, multi-headed creature, but when the hero defeats it, a single, stylized tree grows on the spot where it fell. A graceful, feminine dryad spirit emerges from this new growth, blowing Hercules a thankful, flirtatious kiss. This brief moment brilliantly condenses the ancient mythos into a single visual metaphor, life springing from death, and a spirit born directly from a heroic act. It simplifies the profound tragedy of the bond for a younger audience, focusing on the beauty and immediacy of the nature spirit without the haunting vulnerability. But perhaps the most significant modern sanctuary for the Dryad is the world of fantasy role-playing games. In Dungeons & Dragons, Dryads are a defined monster and player race, their attributes codified into game mechanics. They possess tree stride, the ability to magically step from one tree into another, a literalization of their ancient connection to the forest network. They can charm humanoids, reflecting their dangerous allure, and they are bound to a single, sacred tree, just like their mythological ancestors. Here, the modern player doesn't just hear about the Dryad's curse, they can experience its consequences firsthand, making the moral choice to spare a grove or face the in-game wrath of its guardian. This interactive adaptation allows a new generation to not just learn about, but to actively engage with the ancient rules of respect for nature, translating the old warnings into the language of quests and character alignment. These modern echoes, from Narnia's solemn march to Hercules' fleeting kiss and the strategic forests of a game, prove the enduring power of the archetype. The Dryad has been streamlined, simplified, and sometimes sanitized, but her essential truth remains, a reminder that the wild is not empty, but full of conscious, watchful life. But these myths are more than just ancient stories. They are mirrors reflecting a deep, hidden part of ourselves. The Dryad exists not only in the forest, but within the very architecture of the human mind, a powerful psychological archetype that calls to our most primal instincts. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung proposed that humanity shares a collective unconscious, a hidden layer of the psyche populated by universal patterns and symbols he called archetypes. These are the fundamental blueprints for the characters and forces that populate our dreams, our art, and our myths across all cultures. The Dryad is a stunning embodiment of one such archetype, the anima mundi, or the soul of the world. She represents the part of our own psyche that is still deeply, irrevocably rooted in the natural world, a remnant of a time when humanity understood itself as an inseparable part of the living earth, not as its master. She is the echo of that ancient, instinctual knowledge that every tree, every stream, and every stone is imbued with a conscious, living presence. When we feel a sudden, inexplicable sense of peace walking through an old-growth forest, or a pang of sorrow seeing a clear-cut hillside, we are touching this Dryad archetype within us. It is the part of our soul that recognizes its kinship with the soul of the world and feels a profound, spiritual homesickness when that connection is severed. This archetype manifests in our modern lives in subtle yet powerful ways. It is the deep, quiet satisfaction of tending a garden, feeling the soil between your fingers and witnessing life emerge from a tiny seed. It is the restorative calm that washes over you during a walk in the park after a stressful week, a feeling that cannot be replicated by any man-made environment. It is the compelling urge to fill our homes with houseplants, creating miniature, indoor groves that serve as a tangible, living link to the nature we so often shut out. These are not just hobbies or aesthetic choices, they are rituals. They are unconscious attempts to nurture the dryad within, to water that deep-rooted part of our psyche that withers without a connection to the green, growing world. When we ignore this archetype, when we wall ourselves off in concrete and digital landscapes, we risk a profound spiritual malnutrition. A sense of emptiness, anxiety, and disconnection can set in, a feeling that something essential is missing from our lives, even when all our material needs are met. This is the voice of the inner dryad, growing faint from neglect. She reminds us that our psychological well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of the planet. To understand and embrace this archetype is to begin healing that rift. It invites us to see our relationship with the earth not as a political stance or a practical necessity, but as a matter of profound personal and spiritual health. By acknowledging the dryad within, we rediscover that we are not separate from nature, we are nature becoming conscious of itself. We begin to hear the ancient whisper in the leaves, not as an external sound, but as the voice of our own deepest, most authentic self, calling us home to a world that has been waiting for us to remember our place within its sacred, living tapestry. The belief in tree spirits was not a singular fantasy, but a vibrant expression of a spiritual worldview that saw life in everything. This practice is called animism, the profound conviction that all of nature possesses a conscious, spiritual essence. It is the understanding that a mountain is not just rock and soil, but a being with a presence and a history. A river is not merely flowing water, but a living, singing entity with its own will. The wind is not an empty force, but the breath of the world itself. In this deeply interconnected reality, the dryad stands as the ultimate personification, the named and beautiful face given to the soul of the tree. She translates the abstract concept of a living forest into a relationship we can understand, a guardian we can respect, and a consciousness we can feel. This animistic perspective transforms the entire world from a collection of objects into a community of subjects. When you walk through a forest where every oak has its dryad, every spring its naiad, and every hill its oread, you are not walking through a landscape. You are moving through a society of ancient, sentient beings. Every action, from breaking a twig to diverting a stream, becomes a social interaction carrying moral weight and potential consequence. The old tales of dryads cursing those who harmed their trees were not just about punishment, they were about enforcing the fundamental laws of this spiritual community. They taught that respect for nature was not an optional virtue, but a necessary code for survival within a world that was entirely alive and aware. This world, invites a profound shift in perception. It asks us to look at the gnarled apple tree in an old orchard not as a biological machine producing fruit, but as a patient, enduring consciousness. It suggests that the moss-covered stone by the trailside is not an inert object, but a silent, watchful elder holding the memory of the land. The dryad makes this idea tangible. She gives us a specific being to whom we can offer a silent thank you for the shade, or to whom we might whisper an apology before taking a fallen branch for kindling. In our modern, often disconnected lives, reconnecting with this animistic thread, even as a thought experiment, can re-enchant our experience of the world. It asks a simple yet radical question: what if we truly believed the world was listening? How would we walk, how would we build, how would we live if we saw every forest, every meadow, and every river as a sacred community of conscious lives, each with its own dryad waiting in the quiet? So how do we translate this ancient reverence into our own modern lives? The whispers of the dryads are not lost. They merely ask for a shift in our perception, a simple acknowledgement that the natural world is a partner, not a backdrop. You do not need a sacred grove to begin. Start with a single tree in a city park or your own backyard. Approach it not as an object, but as a living presence. Place your hand gently on its bark and just stand for a moment in quiet observation. Feel the texture, notice the way the light filters through its leaves, and simply listen. This simple act of mindful attention is a form of recognition, a way of saying, "I see you." You might even speak to it, not expecting a voice in return, but offering your own as a gesture of respect. Share a quiet thought, a worry, or a moment of gratitude. This is not superstition, it is a practice of relationship, forging a tiny, personal bridge between your world and the spirit of the tree. You can take this a step further with small, physical offerings. The ancient libations of honey and milk find their modern equivalent in clean, fresh water. On a warm day, gently pour a cup of water at the base of a tree, a simple gift of life to the being that provides shade and clean air. If you have a garden, you can designate a special stone or a quiet corner as a place for offerings. A beautiful fallen leaf, a shiny pebble, or even a few seeds for the birds can be placed there as a token of your connection to the spirit of that place. The offering itself is less important than the intention behind it, the conscious act of giving something back, of participating in a cycle of reciprocity with the land you inhabit. For a deeper connection, you can engage in a quiet meditation with the genius loci, the unique spirit of a place. Find a natural spot that feels particularly peaceful to you, perhaps a quiet forest clearing, a spot by a stream, or even that single ancient tree. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. As you settle, expand your awareness outward. Feel the earth beneath you, solid and supportive. Listen to the symphony of sounds, the wind, the insects, the distant call of a bird. In your mind's eye, offer a greeting to the collective spirit of this place. Do not demand a vision or a sign, simply sit in open, respectful silence, allowing yourself to be a guest in its domain. You might imagine roots extending from your own body down into the earth, connecting you to the vast, quiet network of life beneath the surface. This practice is not about summoning a mythological dryad, but about awakening the part of your own consciousness that remembers how to listen to the land. When you leave, offer a silent thank you, carrying the sense of peace and connection back with you into your daily life. These simple practices are threads, weaving the ancient wisdom of the Dryads into the fabric of our modern existence, reminding us that every walk outside can be a pilgrimage, and every tree a silent companion on the journey. The gentle Dryad, for all her righteous fury, was not the only spirit to haunt the ancient woods. Across the globe, cultures told of tree beings whose intentions were far more ambiguous and sometimes openly malevolent. Consider the Slavic Leshy, a towering, shape-shifting guardian of the forest who was as much trickster as protector. A Leshy could lead a respectful hunter to game, but he could just as easily enchant a disrespectful traveler, making them wander in circles for days until they lost their mind. His laughter echoed like the wind, and his very presence could cause the paths to shift and vanish. Then there are the Japanese kodama, spirits of very old trees whose nature is deeply mysterious. To harm a kodama's tree was to invite a terrible curse upon your village, a blight or a landslide. Yet the kodama itself was not always benevolent. Its echoing cry in the mountains could be a warning or a premonition of doom. These spirits represent a wilder, more unpredictable force of nature, one that does not operate on a simple scale of good and evil, but on the inscrutable laws of the wild itself. So where do our Greek Dryads stand in this darker spectrum, with their myths of truly malevolent tree nymphs, spirits who cursed without cause? The answer reveals the unique moral clarity of their world. A Dryad's wrath was never random or born of simple malice. It was always, without exception, a justified and proportional defense of her sacred home. Her violence was a direct reaction to a violation, a cosmic law of consequence set in motion the moment an axe bit into living wood. Think of it as a spiritual immune system, the forest's natural defense against infection and harm. There is no Greek myth of a dryad luring a child into the woods out of spite, or blighting a farmer's field for mere amusement. Every curse, from the subtle disorientation of a lost traveler to the devastating hunger of King Eurydice, was a response to a specific act of disrespect. This distinction is crucial. It paints the dryad not as a capricious demon, but as an embodiment of natural justice. Her darkness is not inherent, but reflective. She shows us the terrifying face of nature only when we force her hand, when we forget that the forest is not a resource, but a relationship. The true malevolence in these stories was never in the spirit of the tree, but in the arrogant heart of the mortal who believed they could take without asking, who saw a sacred life as mere lumber. Our minds are hardwired to see life in the lifeless. This psychological phenomenon, known as pareidolia, is the reason we spot faces in the clouds, see a man in the moon, or perceive a scowling visage in the gnarled bark of an ancient oak tree. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, constantly scanning our environment and desperately trying to make sense of the chaos by identifying familiar forms, especially the human face. This instinct is not a flaw, it is a fundamental feature of human cognition. For our ancient ancestors, erring on the side of caution, mistaking a log for a predator, was far safer than failing to recognize a real threat. This innate tendency provided the perfect psychological canvas upon which the myth of the Dryad could be painted. When a weary traveler in a dark forest saw a face in the knots of a tree, their brain was not playing tricks, it was following a deep-seated instinct. That fleeting glimpse, combined with the profound silence and mystery of the woods, easily transformed into the belief that a conscious, watchful spirit was truly present, her form woven into the very grain of the wood. Pareidolia gave the unseen a face, and mythology gave that face a name, a story, and a purpose. But why would we feel a connection to that imagined face? Why does the sight of an ancient tree stir something deep within our souls? This is where the biophilia hypothesis enters the grove, proposed by the biologist E. O. Wilson. Biophilia suggests that humans possess an innate, genetically programmed tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. We are not blank slates when we enter a forest. We are coming home to an environment that shaped our evolution for millions of years. The tranquility we feel walking among trees, the comfort we find in the sound of rustling leaves, the simple joy of caring for a houseplant, these are not learned behaviors. They are expressions of this deep, biological need. The Dryad is the ultimate mythological expression of biophilia. She is the story we created to explain and formalize that powerful, wordless feeling of kinship with the natural world. Our ancestors did not just see a face in the tree out of fear, they felt a bond with the life they saw there, a bond so strong it demanded a persona. The Dryad was the answer, a being who personified that sacred relationship, turning an abstract biological impulse into a tangible spirit we could love, respect, and fear. So were the Greeks simply fooled by their own brains? Not at all. Pareidolia and biophilia are not explanations that debunk the myths, they are the very tools that make mythology possible. They provide the psychological and biological foundation for why cultures across the globe, completely independent of one another, developed remarkably similar beliefs in tree spirits. From the Norse Alfr to the Slavic Leshy and the Japanese Kodama, the human experience of the forest has consistently led to the same conclusion: the woods are alive with consciousness. Science gives us the mechanism, the how, but mythology gives us the meaning, the why. The Dryad is more than a misfiring neuron, she is a profound cultural response to a real, biological need to connect. She is the beautiful, story-shaped bridge between the hardwiring of our brains and the sacred soul of the world. She tells us that our urge to see a spirit in a tree is not a primitive superstition, but a fundamental part of being human, a reminder that we are, and always have been, children of the living earth. The whispering leaves of the ancient grove have shared their final secret. We have walked alongside the Dryads, witnessing their sacred birth with a sapling, their long vigil through centuries of sun and storm, and their peaceful return to the earth when their tree finally falls. Their story is far more than a collection of charming myths. It is a profound exploration of the bond between spirit and nature, a timeless narrative woven from the very roots of our collective imagination. We have seen that a Dryad is not merely a spirit in a tree, but the living soul of the tree itself, a consciousness whose fate is irrevocably tied to the fate of her wooden body. Her existence teaches us about the deep, symbiotic relationships that sustain all life, and her tragic vulnerability reminds us of the fragile beauty inherent in the natural world. From their role as enforcers of cosmic balance in Greek mythology to their powerful symbolism in our modern ecological consciousness, the Dryads have always been guardians of a sacred truth. They are the eternal genius loci, the unique spirit of a place, giving a name and a face to the silent, watchful presence we can still feel in the deepest, oldest parts of the forest. Their journey from the painted pottery of Athens to the pages of our favorite books proves that our need to connect with a living, conscious world is a thread that runs unbroken through human history. So the next time you find yourself walking beneath a canopy of trees, pause for a moment, place your hand on the rough bark of an ancient oak, and listen. Beyond the wind and the distant birdsong, there is another sound, a whisper that has traveled across millennia. It is the voice of the Dryad, a gentle reminder that the forest is not a collection of objects, but a community of beings. It is an invitation to see the world not as a resource to be used, but as a relationship to be honored. We would love to hear if you have ever felt that watchful presence, that subtle sense of a spirit in the wood. Share your own stories or thoughts about nature's spirits in the comments below, and let us continue this conversation, keeping the ancient whispers alive.